Hello, everyone. Long time no see. I just want to apologize to anyone who was listening to Cremtress on a regular basis. Thank you for waiting. If you are tuning in and listening to this again, that is amazing of you, and I thank you very deeply. And if you're new to this, welcome, welcome. And there's a little bit of catching up to do, so maybe let's get into that. First things first, there has been what I can only consider, um, well, not a creative gap, but just a gap because so much of my life got very chaotic very quickly. And I did not have the chance to actually record and put together thoughts on movies or shows or anything. I have been watching a lot of movies. I've been watching a lot of shows. I've been uh, spending a lot of time rewatching things, which is probably indicative of the fact that my life was so chaotic that I spent more time rewatching old cinema than to comfort myself, which is I think people do that. They rewatch stuff over and over again because they know how it's going to end, and it's kind of similar for me as well, where I'm comforted knowing what the next dialogue is and what the next character is, and if you're new to this channel, then you probably don't know, but this platform is dedicated to talking about movies and shows and stories in general, and I am extremely excited about how I'm going to proceed with this. So, for the most part, I would like to keep this platform to talk about individual movies and individual shows every episode. But because I'm restarting after a long time, I figured that I would spend some time just maybe giving you recommendations of movies that have impacted me deeply in the past couple of months, and also a movie from a timeline of many, many years ago where I've watched it as a teenager and then rewatched it again as an adult and appreciated it even more. One of the movies I've already discussed on this platform, which is Past Lives. And if you've not watched it, I urge deeply for you to watch that movie. And if you've watched it once, I urge you deeply to rewatch it again because some of the scenes have so much profound beauty in them. And the reason I'm making this episode today is because of this very stark realization that in cinema, whenever a heterosexual relationship is portrayed, it's generally about romance and lust and sex and craving, uh, which is great. That I'm not dissing that side of storytelling. I'm saying that that is typically what is explained. Um, so we as an audience have to give kudos to the times where people go out of the way to develop stories between a man and a woman, between people who are not just a man and woman, between people who are capable of having a romantic relationship. Uh, but that side of the movie is kind of like the secondary, tertiary player in the story. It's not the main driving force of the story. What drives the story is the palpable chemistry. And that's what I want to talk about today. Are movies that are just so well written that it makes you think, wow, I wish I had this with someone. I wish I had this chemistry with a person who just understood me so deeply, regardless of the time I have spent with them, regardless of the nature of my relationship with them. Like we are not trying to restrict this to a romantic situation. What we are trying to say is that whenever a movie comes across where the lust or the sexual tension plays a secondary role, not a driving force, and the relationship of these two characters, and the fact that when they are on screen, you feel comforted, and that when they're away from each other, you feel, oh my God, like where did the other person go? Uh, that's the kind of movies I want to talk about palpable chemistry, about chemistry which runs the story, which almost becomes its own character in its own. Uh, One of the things that I really want to get into is that while I've discussed past lives, I have discussed it from the point of view of the story itself. I've not discussed it from the point of view of the characters. And I believe that the main characters in the story, the setup of past lives is such that there is a girl who was in love with this boy, and there's a boy who was in love with this girl, and now there's as children, and then once again as teenagers, where they only connect virtually, and once again as adults now that the girl is married to someone else. And the story primarily focuses on them catching up over a course of a short time, and just them taking in the concept of the fact that, my God, you grew up. Like you are now a person who is, you are not the person from my memory. You have outgrown that memory now. Now you are a different person. And the setup of the characters are so beautiful because nowhere in the story are they claiming that these people never had romantic feelings for each other. They're very straightforward about that these people were romantically interested in each other. They just never got to that place. They never found that moment of levity where they did finally cross the threshold of just friends to maybe lovers or partners or husband and wife. Like the romance never really seeped in. So now that they are finally in a place where they can see each other, the build up, the tension between the characters is of how things have changed enough for them to know that they cannot do anything about those feelings other than respect them and adore them and love them for what they have become. And the characters are also really interesting because one person is very ambitious. She wants to become a writer. She wants to do something phenomenal with her creativity. And one person who knows this about her, he also has his own ambitions. He also has his own dreams. He's also a very career-driven, career-focused person. But he watches her prosper and he finds joy in that. He finds out that she's married and yes, he does not necessarily not thrilled about it, but he's very polite and very kind to her husband. He's very respectful to her husband. And to build a universe between those characters is very phenomenal because you are actually establishing the rules of the story. You're not throwing the rules out the window. They don't suddenly burst into a makeout scene where like, oh my God, like, damn my marriage, I need you now. Like that. Imagine not breaking that line. Imagine running the story on the basis of the fact that could happen, the possibility of something happening. And that's why that story is amazing. Another movie that I would recommend is, of course, Mood for Love, another movie that I have discussed on this platform, which very recently, Sanket, who, I mean, if you're not familiar with him, check out his videos. He's done a great job in his recommendations as well. And we've done a couple of joint podcasts. Do check those out. Those are pretty good. He sent me an interesting anecdote about that story, about how they were trying to figure out where the characters would go. They were trying to figure out, while writing the story, while creating the movie itself, that do we give these characters an end result of romance or not? So when you watch the movie, whatever you're feeling is what the director was feeling. The director himself was not sure if he wants the characters to end up in a love story. Like he himself was not. So imagine watching a movie where the story is revealing to you at the same time the story is revealing itself to the director. So that is something that, once again, if you have not watched In the Mood for Love, please watch it. Great story. It is again about the chemistry between the characters. They don't address right away whether it is romantic in nature or not, but it is something worth considering as an audience because it gives you a chance to explore that side of the humanity where there are two people capable of being in a relationship, capable of pursuing lust, capable of pursuing, the sexual tension which is building up between them, but not focusing necessarily just on those things. There's a scene in The Mood for Love where this man is writing. He wants to be a writer. Well, wow, that's a connection between past lives and Mood for Love that I didn't realize. But anyway, he wants to write, and he wants to write, I think, stories for a show, like thriller movies and stuff like that. And his friend, who's pretty, who's attractive, who is um, the wife of the man that his wife is cheating on him with, which again, very intense way of meeting each other. They meet each other because they find out that their respective spouses are cheating on them with each other. So they meet each other to understand why that happened. Why did their spouses fall in love with each other? So the premise is a little larger than life, but the details between them is very beautiful. So when she's in that room, she's helping him like come up with storyline. She's helping him give nuances to the characters, and he is like listening to her and jotting down his ideas, jotting down her ideas. And this is the part of the story where you're like, this is not contributing to the story, this is not pushing the story along in any way, but it is very critical to the story because it shows the chemistry between them when there is nothing romantic of nature happening. And that's why In the Mood for Love is so stunning, because you don't get to see that when two characters are capable of having a romantic / sexual relationship, and you don't see that happening between them. How does the director convince you of their chemistry? There's another scene in that where she goes to his room to talk to him, and she's a married woman, and they live in a very close locality building, which everyone knows everybody. And she's about to leave late in the night, so where no one can see her leaving his room. And I will not go into details of what happens in the room, but she she realizes that the neighbors are playing cards, and they're going to play cards late into the night. So the man in the scenario goes like, maybe you should just stay. Maybe don't leave, because if you're worried about what they say and what they do. So she spends the night in his room, worried of her reputation. And this man upholds his part of the deal, where he's like, okay, they've not yet left. I'm just gonna go and get us something to eat. So he goes outside, picks up food, comes back, and he basically stays in the room with her, stays pretending that there's no one in his house other than him. And they spend the night like worried and scared that they're going to be found. And the absurdity of that scene is that nothing sexual happens between them, but how they will be perceived matters. And that's why In the Mood for Love is so ahead of its times as well, where you see a lot of people who refrain from being very close to each other in public because of how their relationship will be perceived and how they will be judged. And especially if they're not supposed to be romantically involved with each other, especially then, how will they be judged? And when you see the parallels between Past Lives and The Mood for Love, you will see that there is a generational difference, where in Past Lives, when she sees her friend after so many years, she just holds him and she hugs him in front of everybody in the middle of New York City. Whereas in Past Lives, it is very hush-hush. No one knows they're friends, but they're very close to each other. When he falls sick, he calls her so that she can come and take care of him. When she is going through pain and sorrow of what her husband has done to her, she rehearses with him what the revenge speech is going to be like. Like, these are the things I'm going to tell my husband when I finally confront him. And she cries in his shoulders. But that never happens in front of anybody. So when you watch Past Lives and you watch Mood for Love and you compare the chemistry, there is one set of people who are not crossing a boundary because she's happily married. And then there is one set of chemistry, which is they're unhappily married, but no one can know that. No one can even get a whiff of the fact that they are friends. Even if they put up the pretense of being happily married, no one can find out in The Mood for Love that they are even friends, because that would also be scandalous. And that's because different generations, different cultural nuances. Like even in Past Lives, you will see that Nora, the character, she is raised in American culture. She was born elsewhere, but she's raised in American culture, so she is more forthcoming and crosses the boundary of the physical barrier quicker than her male friend, who comes from a different culture, which is a little more perhaps nuanced and is a little more shyer of in terms of like opposite sex interactions and stuff like that. But when you compare the storylines, you see that both characters have a boundary they cannot cross, but the context of those characters is completely different because generation differences, cultural differences, and even just the nuance of the fact that there is one character in past lives that wants to break that barrier constantly, which is Nora. And in The Mood for Love, there is that both the characters want to break that barrier, but they're not out of respect for each other. So that's another movie, which again, palpable chemistry. If you've not watched it, please watch it. Speaking of not showing to the world that you are, in fact, perhaps a little bit in love with each other. Now comes a story which has only haunted me for years, and I think about that story off and on. It was also, I think, one of the first stories that made me realize that I was madly in love with Rahul Bose. If you've not watched his movies, I recommend deeply watch anything with Rahul Bose in it. He's a fantastic actor. Even the cheesy cinema, which probably didn't have any nuance or meaning to it, but even in that, he's just a great actor, and he is someone that is a very big part of my crush history. Like, I had a very intense crush on this man. So whatever I say, like, please keep in mind that yes, there is a bit of a bias, but it is also because of how phenomenal he is that the crush developed in the first place. So the movie I want to talk about is Mr. and Mrs. Iyer, which is a very chaos-driven movie, and it is about a heated political situation that was going on between Hindus and Muslims in India. Riots were going on between the two communities, and any semblance of being from the opposite party. So if you were a Hindu that was probably coming in close contact with rioters that were Muslim, or if you were Muslim coming in close contact with rioters that were Hindu, you were basically in jeopardy for your life. And the backdrop of the story are those riots. The backdrop of the story is that situation. Without going into too much detail, the story basically starts with Konkona Sen, who is again she's a top-notch actress and also a fantastic director. If you've not watched Death in the Gunch, I recommend that you go ahead and you watch it. But that has nothing to do with the theme of today. The theme of today is chemistry, and the chemistry Rahul Bose and Konkona Sen it's off the charts in the story because again, it is about not being able to cross a line even though you really want to. So Mrs. Iyer is traveling with her son, and she is basically going across the country to be where her husband is. And this is happening through the riots. At this point of time, it is not introduced how serious the riots really are. Rahul Bose, who happens to be one of the people who is also going to the same place that she's going, kind of gets, friend of friend, kind of common relationships between different people. Like, they end up together because now they're like, okay, she's traveling alone with a child. Why don't you accompany her? You're going to the same place. It'll be good for the both of you to not be alone. And that's it. The agreement is to get from point A to point B together. That's it. There is nothing else to the story. However, at some point in the story, couple of people show up to the bus and start looking for anybody who could be Muslim. They take a couple that is a Muslim couple out of the bus, and the camera fades away from there. We don't know what happens to them. But in that moment, they go to every seat to inquire if anyone is Muslim, to take them away from the bus. And Konkona Sen's character in that moment realizes that her Muslim companion, because Rahul Bose is a Muslim in this, is probably going to be in trouble. So Rahul Bose's character is now both agitated and scared as to what happened to the elderly Muslim couple. So he's about to go and protect them. Konkona Sen stops this man, pulls him down, and pushes the baby onto his lap. And when the men who are inquiring, who is a Muslim and who is a Hindu, when they come to their seat, she introduces Rahul Bose and herself as husband and wife. So this is a story where they have to pretend to the world that they're husband and wife so that they can stay together and take care of each other, because they didn't realize how serious the riots were. And the whole story is about them helping each other and protecting each other and showing each other in different ways that while this is a journey that they know the end of, they will support each other as much as they can, regardless of their religion. And the quick thinking, the presence of mind of Konkona Sen in that moment, both as a woman and as a Hindu in that moment, shows that she understands the gravity of the situation in seconds. So the story does not give you chance to breathe. It is an edge of the seat kind of a story where every challenge they face makes you reconsider even humanity because of how well written the characters are. That two characters from two different religions, two different faiths, two different attitudes towards life come together to protect each other. And the chemistry between them is palpable because they are pretending to be husband and wife while not crossing a line. Mr. and Mrs. Iyer, where she basically is in a room and she is in a hotel kind of. And she's with her son and she's lying in bed and Rahul Bose knocks on the door. Now, bear in mind, this is at least 2 decades ago, the story. So you have to remember that generational context matters, cultural context matters. So he knocks on her door and she gets up and she straightens the edge of her sari that is exposing her ankles, just her ankles. She's wearing a sari, she's like totally covered. But when he knocks on her door, she gets up and she straightens her sari. And then she says, okay, now you can come in. So you have to see the movie from the perspective of the fact that they are going out of the way to not cross that line. He's knocking the door. He's not treating her like, oh yeah, we are buds now because you saved my life and I saved your life. Like that's not what is happening. They are very well aware that there is a line that cannot be crossed. And that line has defined the chemistry in the movie. So again, fantastic film, edge of the seat, almost thriller-esque film, worth watching over and over and over again because of how well it was made, especially in a time where such cinema was not considered cool to make. There came a time where making movies which discussed religions and discussed political scenarios was very cool to make. But this happened in a time when no one was really watching that kind of cinema. And Konkona Sen's character is just, she's a goddess. If you watch her, if you understand who this character is, her character's name is Meenakshi, and you will understand why I'm enunciating the E's in this when you watch the film. So please watch the film. And the final movie that I want to talk about, a movie which has stayed with me long after I watched it. I rewatched it a couple of times too, actually, because I wanted more. The movie was so good that when it ended, I was upset. So it's a movie called The Three of Us. It has my favorite, as I've mentioned many times on this channel, Shefali Shah. And she has been phenomenal in this movie because she has shown us the range of emotions that I think is inhuman. Like, I don't think it is possible to do what she did. And it is about this woman who is in the first stages of dementia, but she's very young. She's probably like in her late 30s, early 40s. So she's on her way to getting early onset Alzheimer's. And she has a husband who's very devoted to her, loves her very much. She's married, has a family, like a typical life, except for this one thing which has happened where she's forgetting simple things from day to day now because of how the disease progresses. And while this is happening to her, she makes a request to her husband to go back to her childhood hometown, where she's left her friends behind. And the request is very interesting because she basically asks for this because she says that she doesn't know what she's going to forget. And because the doctor said that it would be nice for her to revisit old memories because that gives the memory a jog and forces you to like remember and create memory maps. She requests to go and see her childhood friends, her hometown, because she believes that that is a part of her life that got subdued after they moved away from there. So the husband, not completely understanding why, because she did not spend her entire childhood there. I think she spent only 2 or 3 years over there in the story. She spends it in the timeline that she's a tween slash teenager, like she's probably 11, 12 to like 13 years of age. She's probably spent that much time over there. And the story starts from them visiting the hometown and her finding out that all her friends that she grew up with never left that town. They all stayed there. Other than her, no one left that town. And she meets her best friend over there, and he has the same adoration for her. He's married with kids. His life has moved on, like how her life has moved on. And he's just surprised to see her because it's a friendship which happened in your childhood years. And why this movie is so different from Past Lives is because in Past Lives, there is a section of the story where they do reconnect as teenagers, young adults, like almost grown adults. But in the three of us, after being school friends, they completely lose touch with each other. But those 3 years, those 2 years were so special to them that when one of her friends sees her for the first time, one of her gal pals sees her, she sees her and she goes, "Oh my God, you're here." And she recognizes her immediately, as if no time has passed, even though they knew each other only as kids and now as, like almost middle-aged people. So the story is special because the acting is phenomenal. The story is fantastic because the chemistry between the characters, the best friend and Shefali Shah, is phenomenal. The title should probably give it away, the three of us, with the main character, her husband, and her best friend. And I don't want to get into details of it because any detail I would give would probably spoil the movie in some way. So I would have to plan it out so that it does not spoil the movie, but I can talk about it and break it up. I don't know. It's hard. But worth watching multiple times, worth watching, worth reading. All of these movies that I've discussed are in many ways very comforting, very cozy cinema. It also is for people who are not looking for the standard girl meets boy and then they run around trees and butterflies erupt and now they're in love. Like, if you're the kind of audience that isn't looking for something like that, I deeply recommend these 4 films. I insist that you watch these 4 films and you take into consideration the beauty of the cinema. But do let me know if you have any movies you would like me to discuss, and I will 100% look into that and research that and see if I can do any movie discussions, movie breakdowns of your choice, or shows. And I know a lot of people were talking about The Bear for a while, so let me know, and I will see you soon. Bye.